All right, I am recording this right now. It is my birthday, and I have a dinner that I'm going to in an hour and a half. Haven't gotten ready yet, so naturally, this is when I decided to record. I have a couple of quick things, that mentioned at the beginning. Number one, shout out Mike Gorman. If you don't know who that is, he announces for the Boston Celtics. So he is retiring. He has been doing it for forever, like way, 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 way back. Like he was announcing when Larry Bird was playing. So he's been doing this for a while. He's an absolute icon. If you haven't, checked out any of his famous calls, you should do that because he has some pretty awesome ones. It's the end of an era for sure. And, not that Mike's going to see this, but if he miraculously did, hey, congratulations. Happy retirement. You deserve it. I actually met Mike Gorman one time. My dad used to work for CLNS Media, and he had Mike Gorman on his podcast a good amount of times. Yeah, it was a while ago now, but nice guy, super nice guy. Mike is great. He got a good send-off. He announced his retirement, I believe, at the beginning of the year, so it's not like anyone's shocked, but it was interesting to see, guys like Mike Breen, Kevin Harlan, Reggie Miller, like all types of announcers really just giving him the, praise that he deserves. So that's really nice, and congratulations again, Mike Gorman, and I hope you enjoy retirement. All right, and then in other news, I went to the Celtics-Hornets game with my girlfriend on Friday. So this is probably going to go out on Monday morning unless I don't get to it. And if I didn't get to it, oops, sorry. It was an interesting game. Obviously, none of the starters played, which is ironic because it's fan appreciation night. I just thought it was funny. Like, all top 6 guys were questionable, and I'm like driving. I live in Maine, so it's like an hour 45 drive into Boston, and I just remembered like looking at that, seeing they were all questionable. I'm like, all right, well, surely some of them will play, right? No, but that's fine. We weren't going to that game because we were really expecting to see the Celtics players. It was more because my girlfriend's cousins with Steve Clifford, who is now transitioning into a front office role with the Hornets, but great coach. I haven't met him yet. We'll get to that point though. I'll go to a cookout or something. You look at teams like the Celtics and you see all this talent they have, like guys that they just don't play a ton, like Neemias Queta and others that were in the G League. Like even Jordan Walsh was playing pretty fire. He got the start tonight, so congrats to him on that. Peyton Pritchard is just so filthy, though. Like, you put Peyton Pritchard up there and you realize, like, okay, maybe it's time for the NBA to expand. Because this is a dude that literally any time that he's a starter with the Celtics, like, top players out, he puts up 30 and 10 every single time. And it's efficient, too. Like, he's not stat padding out there. Like, he just goes and gets buckets. And then I don't even think he played the fourth quarter. So he was going off. He had like 23 in the first half. It was just nuts. We were up there in the balcony, and we got on the Jumbotron, and I couldn't even really see us, honestly. We were at the far end of the screen, so I'm like panning left to right, and we're all the way at the right. I don't even know if my girlfriend was in it because my big ass head probably was cutting her off on the screen. But there's always these kids that go onto the Jumbotron, and I don't even know how to like non-explicitly say this. They pretend that they are sucking a male appendage. That's how I'm going to say that because I don't know any like more discreet way to say it, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. You'll see a random kid and they're dancing, and then they just start doing that because they realize they're on the Jumbotron, and the people operating the cameras switch so fast every time. They're like, oh man, and then they're gone, and you'll never see those people again. I just think it's super funny. Also, there were a bunch of like probably high school girls that were both behind and in front of us, like 2 different groups of people. And just so many people, like, just walking in and out. Like, there was at least 3 different people that all sat in the same seats in front of us. And I was just so confused of, like, what was going on. Obviously, I'm familiar with the concept of just moving around during the game. And and whatnot. But like some dudes came by for like 5 minutes and then they left. And then these girls come by and then they're not even watching the game. They're on fucking Airbnb. I swear to God, they were sitting there on Airbnb. And my girlfriend's already, like, I can tell, like, we just kind of give each other a look when we're out in public. And we're like, we're going to talk about this later. Because it's just like, what are you doing? Like, I know that the best players aren't playing right now. I know you've got, like, the backups, basically, for both teams. Brandon Miller was out there, though. He looks nice. Back to the people that were kind of in our area, there was just a lot of people that weren't watching the game. And, again, I don't care. Obviously, I am not a man of extreme wealth. I would in fact say that I'm broke. And again, I didn't pay for this game. Like, this was a birthday present. But like, even then, it's like I'm not going to be on my phone at all. Like, I don't get to do this often. And maybe that's just me being a like college student that makes no money, and that's my philosophy on it. But I feel like even growing up, I've always felt like you got to appreciate those moments. And again, whatever, dude. These girls clearly were not interested in basketball. They were just gossiping, and it was just, you know, they're living their life. No judgment or hate to them. I just think of all the apps that you can look at someone like being on during the middle of a basketball game. Like, I don't care if this is a JV game in, you know, northern Maine where you're essentially in Canada. You know, like, I'm going to watch it. I just like, or I'm not going to go. You know what I mean? But it's just crazy to be like, this is my birthday present vacation. And then there's these people that are just sitting there that are just like, oh my God, like, check out this Airbnb. We can rent this place. It's just like, I don't know. It's just a foreign concept to me. I'm probably coming off like a total boomer. Like, kids these days. Whatever, dude. I don't know. Airbnb is crazy, and you can't change my mind on that. This is kind of a trend that's happening when I'm recording these videos, is I have like all these ideas and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to talk about all of them? And I get through every like quick thing that I wanted to mention like 10 minutes in. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I don't have to really worry at this point because I've got plenty of time. I'm looking at this in real time because I hadn't checked this yet. Celtics are obviously the 1 seed. They locked that up. Milwaukee lost to Orlando. So the Knicks are actually the 2 seed. So it goes Boston, New York, Milwaukee, and then Cleveland, Orlando, Indiana. And then the play-in tournament is going to be Philly, Miami, Chicago, and Atlanta. So that's crazy. Because what that means is Cleveland, Orlando is going to be your first round series. And I have been saying for the past like week on Twitter that that is what I want. And then we also get Milwaukee and Indiana, which is going to be awesome. Like, I could not, honestly, matter of fact, let me pull up my tweet. So I said, in a perfect world, this is a tweet that I said 4 days ago. In a perfect world, the first round East matchups would be Boston, Miami, Bucks, Pacers, Knicks, Sixers, Magic, Cavs. So if the Sixers beat the Heat in the first play-in game and the Heat beat whoever wins the other play-in game, so the 8th seed is the Heat, 7th seed is the Sixers, that's literally what I said. That's literally my dream. Like, that's the dream first round for me. And I guess worst case scenario, you could do Knicks Heat rematch and 76ers Boston rematch. Either way, I'm not going to be too upset about it, but like, that's a dream come true. Matter of fact, I'll do the preview after the whole play-in tournament gets finished and we get those first round matchups set. So once we do that, then I'll do like a in-depth breakdown. But I just wanted to highlight that the Magic, like, being the 5 seed is cool versus the Cavs. That was the first round series I wanted for them. I didn't want Magic Pacers just because I like Bucks Pacers as a first round series better, just because of all the drama that was going on in the regular season and in the the in-season tournament. There we go. Too many tournaments, Adam Silver. I think they're changing it to the NBA Cup, so that's a good and worthwhile change that you're making there. But I like those. I like those a lot. It's crazy that the Knicks are going to be the 2 seed. I don't want to be like rude about it, but I mean, that kind of states how weak the Eastern Conference is outside of the Celtics right now. The play-in is going to be interesting. I don't see a world where Chicago beats Miami in the play-in. Even like last year, I'm pretty sure Chicago and Miami was the 8th seed play-in game, and I'm sure that Miami was down double digits at one point in the game. I don't see a world where either Chicago or Atlanta actually like makes the playoffs. Because again, you're talking about Philly or Miami losing 2 games in the play-in tournament. Let's talk about some NBA awards. For me, full on MVP is Jokic. I understand the Luka thing. I really do. No matter what happens, Luka is not going to be a higher seed than any of his fellow MVP candidates. And I just feel like if the winning was there, I would say Luka. If you look at the on-off numbers, Jokic is just different. And I get all the people on Twitter that are like, oh, nerd, actually, kitchen sink statistic. On-off numbers are not this like crazy advanced stat. On-off is pretty simple. It's when you are on the court, you are plus whatever. And then when you are off the court, you are minus whatever. And sure, in a small sample size, that may be meaningless. But over the whole season, Jokic's like on-off numbers are just so much better than everyone else's. And I think that it's pretty obvious that Jokic is the reason that the Nuggets are where they are. And the Nuggets had not a slow start to the season, but they weren't like the runaway first seed. I'm not going to say that like Luka has more help than Jokic. Yes, I will completely admit that Luka has the better stats. Luka definitely has the better stats. He's doing stuff that you haven't seen before. And traditionally speaking, that is a really, really strong case for MVP. I would also say that traditionally that's what you give the MVP award for, a spectacular season that people haven't seen before. Luka's numbers are robotic, video game numbers. However, I don't think you can look at it and say that he is more valuable than Jokic. I get it. The Mavs would not be good if they didn't have Luka. But you still have Kyrie. Kyrie is better than Jamal Murray. Period. End of story. Right? And then you go down the line and you compare rosters. And it's pretty comparable. So I would say Luka has pretty good help. And also worth noting that when the Mavs traded, Grant Williams got PJ Washington. They also got Daniel Gafford. Like, those guys are a bigger reason as to why the team was able to make the turnaround. Maybe if the roster was set, I would feel like Luka was the biggest part in that turnaround, but it was a mid-season turnaround. And yeah, again, great moves by the GM and great play by Luka. I'm just saying, like, Jokic has been that guy all year, and really the Mavs have only been that team since kind of the All-Star break trade deadline, like around that time. And I just think that that when Jokic comes out of a game, the team gets slapped around, and they're way, way, way better with him on the court. It was like the Mavs were minus like 4 with Luka and plus 6 or something with him, and Jokic it was plus 10 when he was on the court and minus 10 when he's off the court. No diss to Luka. He's the number 2 candidate for MVP. He's definitely the runner-up over Shea, but I just think Jokic contributes to winning more. I'm not saying that Luka doesn't do more offensively for his team. There's definitely a happy medium with stuff like that, and I just think that when you have the numbers that Jokic does, where you're very clearly elevating your team substantially more than anyone else is. In the last episode of the show, I did talk a lot about that and what elevating a roster really means and like what the MVP means. And to me, I would say the MVP is the person who elevates their roster the most. And while Luka is statistically the better player, and Jokic has the advanced stats, the tiebreaker to me is the elevation. And I think that Jokic elevates the team better. And that, again, can't state it enough. Not a slight to Luka, right? Like, we're talking about him as, the second or third best player in the world right now. Moving on, I want to talk next about the Defensive Player of the Year. It's pretty clear that it's going to be Rudy Gobert. I do not think that Wembanyama should be the DPOY. He is having a very, very good defensive year. However, he's not exactly anchoring like a great Spurs defense. You saw last year, Rudy Gobert didn't get any love for Defensive Player of the Year. And I'm not saying that he necessarily should have or shouldn't have, but like that was the logic. The Timberwolves were not the defense that they are this year, and I think that Rudy Gobert, personally, I think he deserves it. He's definitely a very underrated perimeter defender, too. That's what I really like about him. He is not afraid to guard people. if we're talking about a dude trying to take Rudy Gobert off the dribble, they're not exactly going to have an easy time doing that. With that said, DPOY is a hard one. There's a lot of great defenders in the league, right? You've got Anthony Davis, you've got Victor Wembanyama, you've got Bam Adebayo, who should have a DPOY by now. Same way Eric Spoelstra should have a Coach of the Year. The fact that neither of those guys have either of those awards ever in their career is kind of crazy to me. When you look at the Defensive Player of the Year award or the Coach of the Year award or the Most Improved Player, those are the awards that, honestly, to me, are even more narrative driven than the MVP, because I feel like at least with the MVP, this is essentially a top 3 player in the league. It's interesting for sure to me of how these awards get decided. I just think when you look at the Coach of the Year or you look at the Defensive Player of the Year, like, it's really hard to not acknowledge the coaching staff or the teammates of said player to like understand that's the reasoning why they are getting this love. Like, the Celtics have a great coaching staff and a great record. Do you give Joe Mazzulla the award, or do you say, all right, well, his assistants have been pretty good? Joe has obviously been the biggest factor on the coaching staff individually, but I think the coaching staff as a whole deserves all the credit if someone like Joe Mazzulla were to win it. And then when you look at Defensive Player of the Year, the Spurs were an atrocious defensive team, and Wembanyama is a great defensive player. And it's hard to make the argument for someone whose team is so bad defensively, but he's averaging 3.5 blocks a game. You know what I mean? Like, that's insane. That's an insane number of blocks. But then you also think, all right, well, everybody else is a friggin' traffic cone, so they're just going to drive right by, and then Wemby has all kinds of shots to block at the rim because everyone's just driving right by the rest of the Spurs defenders. So it's all give and take. When you look at someone like Rudy Gobert changed their defensive culture a lot. And I think that obviously the coach had a lot to do with it too. There's no one person. They traded for Rudy Gobert. It took them a minute. It took them a full season, but they finally integrated everything together. They had Cat and Gobert. They re-signed Naz Reid. Like, they have a lot of good players, a lot of good offensive and defensive players. Speaking of Naz Reid, definitely could be the 6th man of the year. I would not be upset or like even remotely confused as to why someone like Bam Adebayo would be getting the Defensive Player of the Year award. Like, he is an extremely versatile player. He's strong. He's physical. He can guard a lot of positions. It's not about being able to guard 1 through 5. It's just about having some versatility. When you're talking about a good defensive player, Porzingis gets a lot of blocks, but he's not a DPOY candidate. Let's say you have Porzingis and, you bring a center and then Porzingis switches on to you and you're a guard, you're driving on him. Not that he is like the worst perimeter defender in the league, but he's not a complete package type of defensive player. I think Rudy Gobert this season has been. I think that's why I would put him as the DPOY, but I think all of the other awards are so close that I'm like, no, I can't pick one and say definitively that like this is the guy. When you look at something like this, you look at this award and like what it is supposed to mean, I just don't know that you can look at it and say, like, one dude is running away with it. It's hard for me to look at a Most Improved because I don't really believe that Maxey improved that much. And I'm not saying that he's a bad player. I'm just saying, like, the only thing that changed feels like his usage. The Most Improved is going to be who went from less numbers to higher numbers, and that's always what they're going to look at. And I just think that's silly, personally. I have an issue with them handling that award that way just because I don't personally feel as though that's the definitive factor, because it's really less about Maxey being a substantially better player this season as opposed to last year. More, it's Embiid went down and they got rid of Harden, and Maxey was kind of their number one option for a good amount of the season. Like I said, I think that Maxey obviously improved a lot statistically, but when you look at it, it's like, well, maybe you look at someone like Jalen Johnson. That's why if I got to pick the Most Improved Player award, I would go Jalen Johnson, just because to me personally, I don't feel like the Hawks have like created an opening for him to ascend this way. Like, I think he's had to improve himself and, get the ball and earn his minutes and earn the shots that he gets. And not to discredit someone like Maxey, because he's capitalizing on opportunities. Like, Maxey, I feel like could have done this last year. That's my personal opinion, and maybe that's not true, but I just don't think that I look at Tyrese Maxey and I say, this is something that I wasn't expecting. I was definitely expecting, once they dealt Harden, that Maxey was going to step up and, take on a bigger load, and same thing with Embiid. Maxey improved the most, out like statistically. I would still say that the road was paved for him to do that. If I'm voting, I'm probably going to lean towards Jalen Johnson. Again, no wrong choices, though. Finally, looking at Sixth Man of the Year and Coach of the Year. Sixth Man of the Year has a lot of different options. I like Naz Reid a lot. Malik Monk is a really good player. Me personally, I'd say Naz Reid, just because I feel like he's been a big part of that turnaround here with the Timberwolves and them going from a play-in team to a top seed in the conference. That's a pretty big jump. I think defensively, Rudy Gobert has been their guy, and then Naz Reid off the bench keeps elevating his game. He's a great player. A lot of respect for that guy. It's funny when you look at it, because he dropped like 30 on the Lakers the other day. And then you know how all the Lakers fans are. It's like, oh, this guy only goes off against us. And it's like, it's Naz Reid, The odds are looking like Malik Monk is the favorite. Naz Reid is the runner-up. I will say this. Malik Monk has definitely stepped his numbers up. 15-5 as the sixth man. It's pretty good numbers. Yeah, whereas Naz Reid is 13.5, 5 rebounds, and 1.3 assists. Me personally, I just think Naz Reid is one of those guys, especially since Cat went down, that stepped up a lot, helped the Timberwolves kind of stay at the top of the conference. I think Malik Monk is probably the better sixth man, so I can't say like, oh, wow. But I don't know. Naz Reid is a favorite of mine. I think defensively he's a great player too. And you can't really – I'm always going to lean a guy that I view as the better defensive player, even though, Malik is clearly the better offensive player. You just have to kind of look at, like, what their roles are. And Malik is the guy. Like, he comes in to the game as the sixth man. Like, he's the guy. Like, they're giving him the ball when the other players aren't on the court, the other starters, and he is creating things. Whereas Naz has a completely different role, hence why I feel like their statistics are going to be different. Not all six men are created equal. So, that's kind of just how I feel about that. Me personally, I feel like just because the Thunder have made the bigger turnaround and the Magic are not a top seed in the conference, so Jamal's kind of out of that. And then you look at Missoula and you say, all right, well, he has the best roster in the NBA. Of course they're going to get 60 wins if it's a two-man race between Chris Finch and Mark Dagnall, just because of how the Thunder are. And they're going to probably finish in the standings higher than the Timberwolves. I'm comfortable giving it to him instead. It definitely has not been a long show by any means, but I do have to go get ready. So I'm going to come and wrap this with one final topic. I made a video a long time ago now about Victor Wembanyama, and looking back, it was definitely a mistake. The title of the video was, "It's okay to admit that Victor Wembanyama was overhyped." What I meant by that was that I think that he was being set up to fail. He has these great numbers, which again, he does have really good numbers, but it's also like, especially at that point, he hadn't really broken out. Like, I recorded the video and then I posted it like a couple weeks later just because I was being lazy and not editing my videos. I would kind of like record in bulk and then send him out. So I scheduled it a while ahead. And then, of course, he starts breaking out, having these signature games. Yes, he is having a spectacular rookie year, but also you see guys like Anthony Edwards or Paolo Banchero have those types of seasons. Not the blocks piece. Wemby has been a way better defensive player, and that's kind of why he has had one of the best recent memory rookie years. But I still feel like people are putting his ceiling as he's going to be the GOAT, or he's going to be a top 10 player all time, and if he isn't, he's a bust. It's like, I still stand by that point that's bull. That's so dumb to me to say. Like, no, he will not be a bust. He is the best player in his draft class. No doubt. No doubt. There's no player in that draft class that's even close to Wembanyama right now. To look at that and say that wherever his all-time legacy talk is, and like he needs to be X position legacy wise to be considered, a good pick. That's stupid. He's not going to be a bust. He's already proven he's not a bust. At the same time, I still think it's worth acknowledging that his expectations as a player have been set extremely, extremely high. Like, he gets a pass this year, and I'm not saying he shouldn't. Like, the Spurs have been bad, but that's obviously not his fault. They didn't really use him correctly, and they had him on a minutes restriction for a while, and it's just like, all right, dude, like, unleash the alien. We want to see him play basketball. And now a lot of people are getting super remorseful of like, damn, like, we're really not going to watch this. Like, we need to get this dude in the playoffs now. Like, we need to get him to play meaningful games in May and June because he's that guy. I don't know. I think it's interesting with a player like Wembanyama because I see both sides of it. I do think he's been a spectacular player. No doubt the Rookie of the Year. I don't even think I mentioned that as an award just because of how obvious it is to me. Like, there's no contest. I do remember, like, giving the edge to Chet, not, like, right now, but, like, before Wembanyama erased that as being a possibility. Him and Chet had similar numbers, but Chet was a substantially more efficient player, and Wemby and him were not so different defensively at that point. So midseason, Wembanyama breaks out, goes on a friggin' tear, and then it's like, all right, well, you can't defend Chet anymore. That's just not possible. So Victor ran away with the award in the second half of the year. I can't believe I didn't actually mention it, but yeah, definitely the Rookie of the Year. No doubt in my mind. A player like him very easily turns into like a Yao Ming or a T-Mac or, somebody like that if they have injuries in their career or like a lack of playoff success. I'm not saying that Wemby is going to be anywhere near those guys in terms of like high ceiling, disappointing reality. I think that Wembanyama is definitely going to go down as a top 10 player all time. But again, it remains to be seen. You are filling in the trajectory of his career based on how his rookie year started. And I'm just saying, if you go look at Blake Griffin's rookie year numbers, they are definitely comparable. Blake Griffin, another guy who had injury-riddled career and showed you what he could do as that main guy. People forget, but when you look back at those seasons, especially when, Chris Paul might not have been healthy, Blake was that dude. I'm not trying to say that Wembanyama isn't going to be an amazing, amazing all-time great. I'm just saying it is still too early to keep putting these expectations on him. And I feel personally that it's unfair to, expect so highly out of him. Yes, he's a freak. Yes, he's amazing. Like 17 points in 3 minutes against one of the best teams in the league, defending champs, 20-point comeback. Incredible. Just the way that I look at it and I look at things, I just personally don't believe that you can say that Wembanyama is 100% going to turn out to be the greatest player of all time. You just need to appreciate what he is doing. At some point, Wembanyama is going to peak as a player. It's obviously not right now, and you hope that he doesn't have durability issues. When you have success, you got to play a full postseason, and we're not going to see him play a postseason this year because the Spurs were garbage. So we'll see how the Spurs turn around next year, what moves they make in the offseason. I know they're going to be gunning to get some talent around Wembanyama and give Popovich, a good team to coach again, but I just think it remains to be seen on Wemby. He's already set the bar really high for what the rest of his career is going to be. He has had an incredible rookie season. Not trying to take anything away from him. I still just think I was wrong to word it that way, but I still feel like the points that I made in that video are still valid and they still hold up. So, feel free to disagree. A lot of Spurs fans did. It is my most viewed video, and it's all just negative comments. So I definitely have been cautious talking about the Spurs. I'm just saying, like, don't set the guy up to fail, like, just appreciate his greatness. It doesn't like they do this with every rookie of like LeBron and every player that's been drafted since LeBron. They're like, oh, he's going to be the next LeBron. And then he doesn't turn out to be the next LeBron. Everyone's like, oh, what happened? Like, I have avoided the, oh, what happened to Zion thing for a while because it was just like, what happened to Zion? Well, with Zion, it's health. He averaged 27 on 60% from the field, which is insane efficiency and at such a high volume. So with Zion, it's definitely about getting right physically. Regardless, I do not have much time. I got to wrap this show right now.